We all remember the first time we played Minecraft. That first day of chopping down a tree, getting a few apples or some uncooked pork chops, and grabbing just enough stone for a furnace to cook it in. How we were filled with wonder and an awe at just how many opportunities this procedurally generated world had to offer. Then, all that excitement faded once the sky's hue darkened. As the moon rose, you noticed you forgot where you placed your crafting table and furnace. Your hunger's low and there's no animals in sight. You traverse through this confusing and foreign land, realizing you've lost your way. Where was your furnace? You can't find it now. It's done burning and you didn't think to place a torch on top of your crafting table. All of a sudden, a skeleton rattles a few trees over. Then, as you run away, a zombie comes from behind a tree, and your wooden sword doesn't do much before you start taking a few hits. Dodging a third hit by a hair, you keep running until a creeper comes right into your path. As you barely dodge yet another deadly blow, you give up on finding your furnace and dig straight into the ground. Now, by the first sundown, you're likely in a cave, in a small house you've built safely in a village, or just fighting off the mobs nonchalantly. Sure, you're better at the game, but it just feels like Minecraft is much easier. Personally, I remember how crazy it was to find diamonds for the first time, having issues getting a steady supply of iron, nearly starving to death on trips, or being afraid of mobs to the point of avoiding them altogether. Now, I'll go on a mining trip and come back with 3 stacks of iron, 16 diamonds, and enough gold and redstone to never need to mine for it again. For the last year or two, every time I take a mining trip, I find myself skipping iron deposits now, which is something I never thought that I'd do when I first started playing. I remember fighting off mobs and running away to heal with an apple or whatever I could scrounge up, but now I just make sure to have a stack of steak in my inventory and have a shield on hand, and I'm good. What can we do to add a challenge back to Minecraft without alienating new players, and how can we increase difficulty without taking away from the experience of those who enjoy a laid-back sandbox game? Is this achievable with Minecraft's game design and Mojang's current vision for the game? To answer all these questions, we must first look at what specifically is making the game easier by their addition to the game, and how we can work to reduce their effects or counter their easiness with new challenges or goals altogether. Before we get into the specifics, let me preface by saying this. I am in no way, shape, or form talking down to Mojang by saying these additions make the game easier. I'm also not part of the camp that believes every change they make to the game is inherently bad. I'm not acting like I know more than them on how to fix the game, and I am aware that their scope for changes is tethered by the fact that features have to work and be feasible for touch, console, and 2 different versions of PC, which is a daunting task for any developer. This is simply one person's thoughts on how to improve the challenge and add variety and novelty back to a game that he's been playing for over 12 years. With that being said, let's get on to it. Let's start off with a banger here. Beds. Beds were added to Minecraft to set a spawn point and let the player skip nighttime. This was at first a fantastic feature, as the threat of dying made players want to build close to world spawn, and beds truly allowed for better exploration and venturing off into more of the procedurally generated worlds we spawn into. They've been a staple of the game, and even looking at how things are now, I don't think their addition to the game is a mistake. The problem, however, lies within these facts. They are far too easy to make, they skip the night entirely, and they remove challenge and risk from the game. Beds are too easy to make in the fact that they require wool and 3 planks. I started a playthrough for the purposes of seeing if my claims for this video were valid, and in less than 90 seconds I got a bed. I wasn't even trying to get one, I just spawned so close to sheep I figured, might as well after chopping a couple of trees. This made it to where once the sun set, I could have easily skipped a nighttime. The challenge of the first night in Minecraft is all but gone unless you spawn into a biome where sheep are absent. Skipping the nighttime is a problem because it eliminates a large chunk of the survival aspect in survival mode. This eliminates the risk of not having a house, and there is really no extrinsic motivation or game mechanics that encourage building, which is a topic for a whole other video. I'm not saying skipping nighttime in and of itself is a problem, but the fact that most players are able to skip their first night is a problem. Players should have to earn the ability to skip night after fighting off monsters and becoming hardened by the dangers lurking in the dark. Sprinting is another integral part of the game, added to give a way to quickly drain the hunger bar whenever it was first added to beta 1.8. It was a great way to traverse, but it did a few harmful things. It almost immediately made minecarts obsolete, as you could sprint just barely slower than a minecart could travel. It made fighting mobs far easier, and it took the poignancy out of exploration. That last point isn't necessarily a difficulty problem, but I do think walking through caves, climbing up a mountain, or traversing through a forest was far more immersive when all you could do was walk. Caves were scarier, exploration was more natural, and you wouldn't miss a point of interest or neglect the beautiful scenery because you weren't blowing right by it. On to more relevant topics though, the obsolescence of minecarts was a really unfortunate consequence of sprinting. This made the game obviously easier in terms of getting to places more quickly, but the resources and building required to make minecart tracks was one of the few times the game extrinsically encouraged building, and the time taken to clear out land, gather enough iron, gold, and redstone for said tracks was a challenge that sparked creativity and problem solving like no other. Even in the modern game, I consider building minecart tracks between locations and bases as it's something that greatly interests me, but the resources aren't worth it when I could just sprint that same distance and get there almost as fast. Now add horses and elytra to the game, and there is no reason outside of redstone to use a major feature of the game. Building a minecart track is just a waste of time. Finally, and most importantly on the subject, you are able to outrun any mob. Again, on my playthrough, I decided to survive the first night, and when mobs got too tricky, I just sprinted away and they stopped following me. There was no way two different skeletons could catch up to me to continue attacking. Heck, even spiders and baby zombies were easy to shake off my trail with nothing but sprinting, which was not the case in the alphas and betas. So, armed with nothing but a stone sword, a leather tunic, and food, I was able to run my first night troubles away. Any sense of wonder, incentive to build key infrastructure, and danger to combat is almost entirely eliminated by sprint. Speaking of food, hunger was also added in beta 1.8. This completely altered how we heal ourselves in the game, as well as added a meter players would have to manage to stay alive in their survival playthroughs. It also added the ability for food to stack to accommodate for the fact that you would need more food than you used to now that food was no longer used for exclusively healing health. This was a novel and interesting change, but it presented issues making the game easier and ironically less challenging, even though it was a new way to run out of health on your worlds. Healing went from manual to automatic, strategy was taken out of combat, and the addition of stackable food eliminated difficult inventory management decisions. The first 2 points are very much related, so I'll cover them simultaneously. Before beta 1.8, when in combat, one would need to take breaks to eat to get their hearts back to a comfortable enough level for them to continue to go back fighting off the monsters. There was genuine strategy in what was a very challenging gameplay experience. Now, however, you can tank a good few hits before eating, because as long as you've got a full hunger bar, you're going to heal automatically. While I recognize that you will eventually need to eat during combat to continue your fight, a decent chunk of combat doesn't require eating or healing, and that's a major issue. Most fights don't last longer than 15 to 30 seconds, and you'll rarely need to heal up or eat more than once in that time frame in modern Minecraft. That means you and your nearly invincible shield can breeze your way through combat without stopping, and the original challenge of finding a way to evade mobs to quickly eat is gone. Now, we can just destroy our enemies in a flurry of hits while sprinting circles around them. This next point is not necessarily something I'm saying we should do away with or calling it out as a major problem, but it did make the game markedly easier. The addition of stackable food in the sense of steaks and other previously unstackable food before beta 1.8 eliminated one of the biggest questions a player had to ask before preparing for an adventure. Would they load up on as much food as possible and by extension leave less room for loot and blocks? Or would they try and collect as much loot as possible, potentially not allowing the chance to heal enough to survive multiple combat encounters? That was always a really fun question to ask when playing the game, and was a source of conflict for young Barlex as he first dove into beta 1.6.6 on the Xbox 360 edition. Now, however, we just get a stack of steaks or golden carrots and then never really have to worry about much in the realm of food, combat, or what we're going to fill our inventories with. Caves and Cliffs was a fantastic update and truly revolutionized the world generation in Minecraft, and I couldn't imagine caving and underground exploration without the features this multi-part update gave us. However, there is one major issue I've run into with it: ore generation. I played this world with shaders to first of all make the game pretty, but secondly, it highlights ores. Now, look at how many ores are in this one cave opening alone. With the cave update, Mojang made caves massive expanses and the darkness allowed mobs to spawn in large quantities. This means that mining genuinely became more difficult if you were to traverse through these caves. I appreciate this greatly, as it means you'll need to be somewhat kitted up before heading underground, but the problem lies after that. Once you get down below ground, ores are everywhere. I've come out of a cave with 20 plus diamonds in less than 30 minutes, and the vast majority of them have been found by running away from mobs. I'll have so much iron in my inventory that I start ignoring deposits altogether, which is again, something I never thought that I would do. I completely ignore copper, redstone, and lapis because I know I'll have plenty of it when I need it, so I don't bother mining it up. This is a major problem, and it highlights one of the main points on my last video talking about Minecraft when I brought up how progression is so quick and easy. Ores are so common that even with the added challenge of mobs spawning in caves in large quantities, you'll still be able to get a full set of diamond tools in under an hour of spawning. It was a problem before the cave update, but now it's only been exacerbated. There's nothing else to say really. Ores are simply too easy to find. I may get some flack for this one, but mending is such a major problem for me in the game. Before the book existed, to repair tools, you'd actually have to combine a diamond with your pickaxe to repair it. Now, we just apply a super easy tradable book to all our tools and armor and never have to worry about them again. Genuinely, there is no reason to worry about losing tools, even to death in most cases now that netherite makes tools impervious to lava. There is no cost, no sacrifice made to keep these godlike tools in commission. Obviously, experience points fuel it, but that's such an infinitesimal cost compared to what you're getting with netherite. Frankly, enchanted diamond tools only being repaired by a handful of diamonds is a steal already, but being able to do it for pretty much for free, that's kinda crazy. Add on to the point that the most powerful enchants in the game is able to be traded with the villagers instead of found in structures, and you have yourself a major problem with balancing. In terms of structures, we need to bring up a point used in nearly every corner of life: risk versus reward. Let's take you back to math class and talk with this algebraically. Our x variable will be our risk, and our y variable will be our reward. A good game design is when these two variables come out to a linear equation, ideally y equals x, which is essentially saying that your reward is equal to the amount of risk that you go through. If you beat what is almost certain doom, you should be rewarded with something that makes risking your life and risking losing all of your items worth it. If the risk is maybe getting hit with an arrow once if you forget to mine up some string, the reward shouldn't be more than some bread and iron horse armor at maximum. You see what I'm getting at? Minecraft's structures don't necessarily follow that graph. A desert temple, for example, has a risk factor of 1 to 2 at most. There's the risk of TNT, but you can mine up the pressure plate easily and never have to worry about it again. Their reward factor, however, is a 6 to 10 depending on the loot roll you get. I've gotten 2 diamonds and 3 emeralds from one single temple. The temples aren't the only ones that have this issue either. Dungeons are the most obvious example. Their risk factor is a 2, with the only holdup being the player not being able to place a torch, and their reward factor is a solid 4 to 5. The stronghold, which literally gets you to the boss fight in endgame, is largely uninteresting and not at all challenging. This is a 3 to 4 on risk at max, and a solid 10 on reward. Now, looking at ancient cities, the risk is a 9 with the threat of the warden, but the reward is maybe a 6 or a 7. There's nothing in this structure besides the recovery compass or certain enchantments that the player cannot find in other structures, and nothing there is worth the risk of getting murked by the most powerful mob in the game. No structures aside from the woodland mansion, trial chambers, or ancient city have any challenge to them, and only one of them offers proportional reward for that risk, which is a major problem in the fact that players can go to structures that they can sleepwalk through and grab mid to late game loot as a result of it. Let's face it, mobs themselves are pretty dumb. Like, really dumb. Not only that, they aren't at all challenging. Zombies come at you and walk right into holes. Skeletons keep shooting straight at you instead of flanking when you've got a shield. Creepers give up on chasing you pretty easily. The Wither can be taken down by spawning it in a goofy location. And the final boss of the entire game can be defeated by beds. This is one of the biggest problems when it comes to the game being laughably easy. Every antagonist in the game is a joke. It boils down to 3 main points: outdated design, poor AI, and one-trick ponies. First off, when Minecraft was first releasing things such as zombies, skeletons, and creepers, they were novel and they were challenging. However, in the last 15 years, Minecraft has grown and evolved a ton, and these mobs haven't. I could spend an entire video on this, but for everybody's sake, I'm only going to mention a few. Spiders don't necessarily feel like spiders, and their design is oversized, slow, and clunky. When climbing up walls, it looks like they just levitate, and I see spiders rarely utilize that feature. Zombies don't really act like zombies. They don't limp, their attacks are just hitting you, and they feel very plain. Skeletons are outdated in the sense they don't fire different types of arrows, they don't melee in Java Edition, and they never reposition themselves. When it comes to poor AI, I think it can be summed up quickly. Zombies walk into holes, skeletons shoot each other and then completely stop worrying about the player, no mob tries to reposition itself when the player has a shield, and mobs aren't programmed to work together to take down the player. Finally, tracking AI is very poor, as sprinting away gets most mobs to stop chasing you after a mere few seconds. The most neglected piece on mobs and the lack of difficulty they present is the fact that they are all one-trick ponies. Zombies are slow and hit you. Baby zombies are fast and hit you. Skeletons are slow and shoot at you from a distance. Spiders jump at you and hit you. Cave spiders jump at you and hit you with poison. Phantoms slowly fly at you and hit you. Creepers sneak up on you and blow you up. You see the problem here? I just described everything you need to know about fighting these mobs with basic phrases. Each of these mobs attacks you the same way every single time they fight you. It's fine that each mob has one type of damage it does, but there's no variety, no novelty, and no challenge to knowing that nearly every mob in the game will just slowly approach you and hit you. Overall, these additions to the game have made Minecraft easier, but for the vast majority of these features, I don't think their addition is a mistake. The main point I wanted to make with listing these in detail is that 2 different things have happened. The first is that Minecraft evolved and certain features didn't. For example, outdated mobs and structures with little risk. The second is that certain features were added and Minecraft itself didn't evolve with it. The good news is, however, that all these problems can be fixed while still making the game feel like Minecraft. How do we go about fixing these issues? How do we add challenge back to Minecraft without alienating new and casual players? I've spent a great deal of time thinking about this, and each issue needs a new approach. For each topic I covered earlier, we'll be tackling them from a different angle. With these proposed changes, I wanted to promote change in the game by giving new uses to underutilized features to encourage a player to use every corner of the game's feature library. Without further ado, this is how I would address Minecraft's difficulty problem. For beds, we know we can't remove them from the game. Frankly, I wouldn't want to. However, they are far too easy to acquire. The terror of the first night needs to remain, so the current crafting recipe needs to go. I propose that we add a few more layers to the recipe and give some love to a neglected feature of the game. You will no longer be able to craft a bed with 3 wood and 3 wool. What you will do now is you will need to find or craft a loom, and combine wool on either side of a string to create cloth. Once you have 3 cloth, you can combine this with 3 planks to make a bed. This change is important for a few reasons. Obviously, slowing the player down in terms of progress adds challenge to the game as well as slows that breakneck progression that's been mentioned on the channel a few times now. Secondly, and most importantly, this forces the player to fight spiders, loot mine shafts, or find string in a structure or somewhere in the world to be able to craft a bed. This necessitates confrontation and exploration, giving the player more of a reason to go out into the world, fight, and explore. Not only this, but encouraging the player to fight mobs as soon as possible will give a new challenge in the sense that you have to face monsters without high-level gear, and it will also help create more confident players after having to conquer a new challenge in their first night. Sprint is a tricky one to take care of. I couldn't solve it alone, so I talked with my Discord community. If you want to talk about upcoming projects, share your thoughts on recent videos, or find some people to play games with, you should join my Discord server. The link to join is in my bio and on my channel page. What my community and I came to are a few conclusions. Sprint is now finite. You can no longer indefinitely sprint, helping balance that out and encourage the use of minecarts and horses in the early to mid game. If you miss having infinite sprint, you can now brew a potion of stamina with a breeze rod and a rabbit's foot, and for the duration of the potion, you can sprint to your heart's desire. This not only helps minecarts and horses have a bit more of a use, but again gives love to another sometimes neglected crafting station in the brewing stand. Hunger is a major issue in terms of taking away the strategic nature of combat and making healing automatic. There are 3 routes we can go down. The first is we can do nothing and leave hunger as it is. The second is we can keep hunger the same, but healing only happens when food is eaten after hearts are full. The third, and the most interesting to me, is fully leaning into the survival aspect of this game. Hunger no longer has anything to do with healing, it is merely something that needs to be managed. At lower levels of hunger, you'll start to have debuffs like loss of sprint, smaller health bar, mining fatigue, and less damage when hitting mobs. However, to heal, you need healing potions. Getting healing potions to early game players is not something that's feasible aside from putting them in lootable structures, so we're going to give some more love to a neglected feature, the bowl. If you combine a flower, a mushroom, and a piece of cooked meat, you will get a bowl of sustenance, and it heals you 3 hearts. This is almost as good as the health potion, which heals you 4 hearts, so to balance this out, the bowl of sustenance cannot be stacked, whereas the healing potion can be stacked up to 16 like it already is in the game. I firmly believe that this will help add some strategy back into the game, as well as giving players a new challenge of inventory management. Most positively, however, players will have a reason to forage and look for flowers and mushrooms. To help the players as they're first starting out, we will also up the spawn rate of mushrooms. Ores are far too easy to get, and it speeds up progression to a detrimental degree. To combat this, you can change ores in one of 2 ways. First, you could fundamentally change ores as suggested by Justifiable. Ores can be much rarer and have different levels of purity, warranting more items per block the more pure the ore is. Ores can be found underground, but iron can be found in rarer but large veins along mountaintops, and gold can be panned for in small bodies of running water. This idea is interesting to think about, but for some it could teeter more into a more of a modded Minecraft territory. So, secondly, and the one I think Mojang is more likely to add, is to drastically reduce ore spawns. All ores are now far less likely to spawn and are found at different levels in the world. Coal is relatively the same across all areas, albeit spawning slightly less above ground and slightly more in caves. Copper spawns slightly less in general and is found from Y level 80 to Y level 0. Iron spawns 50% less and is now found from Y level 20 to Y level negative 30, but is still found in small quantities along mountaintops. Gold spawns 25% less and is found from Y level 10 to Y level negative 40. Redstone is found 10% less and is found from Y level negative 20 to bedrock. Lapis is found 70% less and is only found from Y level negative 30 to bedrock. Emeralds are only found on mountaintops and their spawn rate remains the same. Diamonds spawn 10% as often as they do now, and they only spawn from Y level negative 40 to bedrock. They will also not spawn in veins larger than 3. These changes are being suggested for a few reasons. First off, the progression from stone tools to iron tools is such a short time that I wanted to stretch out a little while longer, making the player really have to settle in with stone tools and earn an upgrade. If you want to get iron, you need to climb and search the highest mountains or deep into caves, adding some danger to your exploration and making the player really have to work to get a full set of iron gear. To acquire massive amounts of iron, one would need to really spend some time underground, and the whole phenomenon of getting iron gear before venturing underground would be eliminated, or at least far rarer than it exists today. As for diamonds, they are synonymous with the creeper as symbols for Minecraft. As a result, we need them to be far harder to get. We need to bring back that feeling of first finding diamonds by making diamonds far rarer. This would make the process of finding diamonds more difficult, and we could even up their spawn rate in ancient cities in the deep dark to add a bit of extra risk to a high reward such as diamonds. It would also help stretch that progression out a little farther so the build up to diamond armor is a slow, arduous, and rewarding one. This would do a few things. It would make diamond armor found in places like the ancient cities and woodland mansions far more valuable. It would make iron armor more widely used, and it would show that if you run into a player with full diamond gear, they earned that stuff. This is one of the issues I hope happens the most. I want to have to struggle with stone tools until I can comfortably have enough iron to make that my primary tool. I want each stage of tool progression to last a while, and I want to be genuinely excited every time I upgrade tools. I want diamond armor to be a thing you have to earn and put on piece by piece. This suggestion is simple, and Mojang already showed their ability to easily manipulate how ore generation works in the snapshots of the cave update. So, I would love to see these changes be made for the betterment of the experience. Mending is a simple fix. You can do one of three things. Ideally, in my opinion, you remove it from the game altogether. I know that would upset a lot of players, and given the fact that Mojang hasn't taken the Phantom out of the game, mending isn't going anywhere. So, the second thing you can do is making mending only accessible from exploring dangerous structures like ancient cities or ominous trial chambers. The final idea was proposed by Thrasher04, or as you may know him on the channel, Alex. He said that because mending is such a powerful enchant, it should only be obtainable from killing the Ender Dragon. I want to tone this back a bit, because for being on a multiplayer server this could lead to some issues. My modified suggestion is to lock mending entirely behind the end. Mending will only now be accessible in chests and in cities or into ships. There will be no more overpowered trading, there will only be loot chests now. Exploration must be encouraged, and further, we must find ourselves in a place where the most powerful enchantments are only capable of being acquired through the most challenging means. Otherwise, there will be no need to repair your tools, no need to make new ones, and frankly no need for diamonds after you make a full set and put mending on it. This change fixes that, and if you have full mending, you have earned it through exploration and confrontation in the end. This is a far better alternative than someone just getting these mending books from trading in a glorified prison workshop. Structures are deserving of a whole video on themselves, but I'll do my best to keep this brief. Instead of breaking down every structure and what I do with it, I'll save that for later and give some broader suggestions. If you want to see me break down how I would change each structure and what else I would add, let me know in the comments below and consider subscribing. Just like those I've mentioned here, you'll have a chance to get a shout out on a future video. Now, back to structures. For villages, make them far rarer. Don't get me wrong, I love seeing multiple villages close by because it makes my job as a builder much easier whenever I want to make some really cool kingdom structures. The problem is, however, that villages get a massive amount of supplies to the player, especially food. This eliminates the need to stock up on food early in the game, and the fact that you can find villages so quickly and reliably, I think the difficulty and excitement of finding a village would be massively increased if we dropped their spawn rate by anywhere from 50 to 75%. This would make exploring to find a village important, and it would encourage the player to go out seeking one rather than just stumbling upon it in their first day of a new world. Importantly, my community mentioned how easy it was to find in-gates. Grammar Issue says that finding an in-gate is way too easy as soon as you figure out how and where they spawn, and I agree. So, let's make them spawn 10,000 blocks away from spawn, and with multiple chambers like the trial chambers. As for the topic of risk versus reward, I think every structure could learn from the trial chambers. 1.21 was a fantastic step in the right direction for having risk matching one's reward, and the addition of the ominous bottle further proved that, where you can personally up the challenge by drinking a concoction that in turn gives you far greater loot and overall makes things less than easy. If every structure added that factor, as well as the multiple rooms and ways to generate differently, we could be playing a whole other game. I've always wanted an overworld overhaul, far more than an end update or any other update the community has asked for that matter, as I want temples and dungeons to be challenges that are different every time with loot matching how hard you have to fight for it, and all of my suggestions could be summed up by taking what worked for the trial chambers and applying it to every other structure. Give us different types of rooms and weird angles for mobs to come at you. Give us some crazy traps and mobs unique to each structure. Give us some awesome loot that can only be obtained from clearing an area. That would help a ton. As for mobs again, this could be its own video, but I'll keep my suggestions broad while giving a couple specific examples to show you what I mean. First, we need to get rid of the outdated design. We've seen it with the camel and the fact that Mojang can give us some gorgeous animations and textures, so let's see that for all of our mobs. I want zombies that limp towards you with hands switching from outstretched to by their sides. I want the attack for zombies to be slashing and biting and their animations to match that. I want to see skeletons draw back on their bows and maybe even have quivers. When it comes to poor AI, every single mob needs an AI overhaul to match their new animations. I want to see better pathfinding, new ways of attacking, flanking maneuvers, you name it. I want these mobs to have an update to their brains because they have not aged well these last 15 years. Now, onto the topic of one-trick ponies. This was briefly touched on earlier in the animations part, But this idea for zombies and what we can do with them is a great example on how to fix this problem. Zombies shouldn't just hit you. Now zombies will slash, hit, and bite you. Each does different amounts of damage and at different attack speeds, with hit being the fastest speed, lowest damage, and most knockback. The slash will be more damage but less knockback and slower than regular hit. It will have a 15% chance of inflicting a version of the wither effect for 5 seconds while the player bleeds from the slash. The bite will be the slowest to use with the most damage and giving an effect such as poison, hunger, fatigue, weakness, or whatever the devs decide would be best. Heck, it could even be a random roll of all of these I just mentioned. They will also now be able to break down doors in Java on hard mode, and each zombie has a 10% chance of spawning with the same speed as the player at their regular walking rate, to give some variability to them. These features turn Minecraft's most basic mob into a threat that can attack you in 3 different ways if you don't keep your distance. Now imagine if we applied this same care to every mob in the game. We would be playing an entirely new survival experience. Fighting mobs would become challenging again, and you need to strategize in terms of healing before every encounter when paired with the hunger fixes. To talk more on how the marriage of these 3 features can vastly improve the difficulty of Minecraft, let's look at spiders. As players of the game before Sprint like myself will remember, spiders were super fast. You weren't supposed to be able to outrun a spider, but now that Sprint is in the game, we need to fix that somehow. Spiders are now like they are in Spiders 2.0. The Spiders 2.0 mod makes spiders more animated, more dangerous, and more versatile. Each leg of the spider can move on its own to make animations silky smooth, and spiders can crawl on any surface not touching water. They can scale walls, hang upside down from ceilings, or climb any fence or wall to reach you if you are not fully enclosed. Their attacks can be surprise drops from the ceiling of a building or a cave, jump attacks, and their increased speed will remind you of alpha and beta days. Not only that, but we will add something this mod doesn't by making spiders 50% smaller, but only reducing their hitbox by 30% to give the player a fighting chance against this beast. This paired with the beds fix will make for an intense couple of showdowns to finally secure a bed, and the gameplay experience will drastically improve as a result of this. Also, the ability for spiders to climb on any surface and drop attack the player gives an added challenge to compensate for Sprint taking away the spider's ability to outrun the player. This is how Minecraft evolves the old features as it adds new ones. This is how we add novelty and challenge to a game that we've been playing for over a decade. Again, these suggestions are not me bashing Mojang or saying that any of these additions were mistakes and shouldn't have been added to the game. I'm merely pointing out that as features make things more streamlined and as players are able to more easily navigate the game, new challenges or roadblocks need to be put in place to extend that gameplay loop as much as possible, as well as add genuine challenge and variability to the game. Even going back as far as the Nether update, it's apparent just how much Mojang is headed in the right direction. The trial chambers, the expanded caves with multiple mobs spawning, the varied and detailed new mobs they're adding to the game are all fantastic signs that the studio agrees with us on this subject. What needs to happen, however, is Mojang needs to update these legacy features, as the game will feel shallow and like there's a genuine lack of parity until then. I mean, look at the cow compared to the camel. It's daunting to see just how little complexity in texture and animation there are. Or, look at the trial chambers compared to the stronghold. Minecraft is evolving, and I'm so excited to see where the game goes next, but I beg of Mojang to bring existing features up to date with new additions before adding anything else. This will not only stretch out a short gameplay loop for far longer while still keeping the game feel like Minecraft, but it will also give veteran and new players alike excitement, challenge, and genuine fulfillment from the moment they spawn into their new and completely overhauled worlds. But hey, that's just how this guy would go about addressing Minecraft's difficulty problem.